Thank you very much, Tom. Now, the Danish label GANNI has been making Scandinavian fashion shine for around the world for 14 years, now dressing the biggest stars like Rihanna and Gigi Hadid. And during the Copenhagen Fashion Week, they organized an exhibition to showcase some innovative materials, putting 7 emerging startups in the spotlight, and one of them is BIOFLUFF. Now, the startup incubated at LVMH's La Maison des Startups has a huge mission to revolutionize the textile industry with new plant-based materials. And in March, both of those companies released a collab bag that you're about to see made out of a biomaterial called Savin. Now, for this next very exciting conversation on sustainable fashion, please welcome onto the stage Nicolaj Reffstrup, the CEO and co-founder of GANNI and the co-founder of Lookup Ventures, and Roni Gamzon, the co-founder and chief commercial officer at BIOFLUFF. Please welcome them. You look fantastic. Hello, thank you for being here. Hello, Nicolaj. So, lots has happened. Roni was here with us last year. Lots has happened since last year. Let's perhaps just talk about the collaboration with Stella McCartney that happened at COP28. I think we can give her a round of applause for that collaboration.
Well, thank you so much.
And also, you raised a lot of money this year. So please, tell us, first of all, about Stella McCartney.
So first of all, it's so amazing being back here and just seeing both how we evolved, but also how NetExplo or 2050 now has evolved. Since last year, we finalized our seed round of 2.5 million by leading climate tech European venture capitals. And we launched our first public collaboration with Stella McCartney at COP28. Which was led then by the collaboration we did with GANNI at Copenhagen Fashion Week.
So we're about to talk about this collaboration. Maybe we can have a seat.
Sure. Thanks.
So can you tell us a little bit more before we get into this collaboration? Tell us a little bit more about the money that you raised. You closed 2.5 million seed round and it was led by Astonor Ventures.
Yes. So first of all, what we do is create completely plant-based alternative to all kinds of fluffy materials. So fur, shearling, fleece, and the application is first in fashion, but it would go into packaging, it would go into interior, and even plush toys, which are today completely from plastic. So we were invested by Astonor Ventures, which is a global European-based venture capital that is on a mission to decarbonize the supply chain in fashion, in food, and agri-tech.
Now, Nicolaj, I said this in the introduction, but during the Copenhagen Fashion Week, you unveiled a very new edition of the bag. It's based on the Boo bag. Here it is. But this time it's made out of Savin. So we're going to be talking about that material. It's made out of fibers such as flax and hemp, but you're going to tell us more about that in a second. But Nicolaj, why did you choose to collaborate with this startup specifically, BIOFLUFF?
Well, maybe taking one step back. So at GANNI, we started mapping out our carbon footprint back in 2016. So it's been going on for a while. When you do that, you quickly figure out that most of your carbon footprint is derived from the actual product, and a lot of that from the material you put into the product. So to kind of mitigate that or accommodate that situation, we launched an internal department called Fabrics of the Future, where we constantly work with around 30 innovative new material startups, try to help them kind of figure out if they have a viable product in their hands, what it takes to get to the market, if it's kind of variable, how it kind of performs in terms of look and feel, permeability, durability, stuff like that, but also in terms of whether or not it kind of drops into existing infrastructure or supply chains, whether it's at price parity, how kind of supply is configured, sheets or rolls, etc., etc. So through all that, we typically have 5-6 products that are graduating every year. So out of the cohort of 30 different material products that we work with, and you guys were one of them. Actually, in this case, we came across you on LinkedIn. We don't do fur. We haven't done fur for many years. But we saw your product on LinkedIn and reached out because we thought it was so cool that it contains no plastic. So most other kind of alternative solutions out there at the moment, they contain a bit of PU. And that's not kind of like where we want to go. So we were so happy to kind of be able to reach out to you and hit a collab here.
So tell us about this bag and this material, Savion. What is it made out of? And perhaps tell us what you're wearing today.
So first of all, I'm wearing, my suit is from the latest GANNI collection. So 50% of it is recycled materials. And then my shirt is from Savion, and the bag is both from Savion and recycled leather, which GANNI use quite often. And so we use existing fibers such as nettle, hemp, and flax, and we create these plush textures that usually would be either from animal materials or they would be from plastic. And the problem with all these fluffy materials is that they shed. And then you're walking around shedding microplastics everywhere. And this is, as I said, it's in fashion, but it is even in toys. So this bag, what you see is not plastic, it's not animals, it's not even yarn, it's completely genuine plant fibers, and we keep the structure of them. And then we source them in Europe, also in France, and then we produce entirely in Italy.
Now, Nicolaj said that you're also the CEO of Lookup Ventures, and you got involved in helping fund and scale up environmentally friendly startups. When you say that you realized just how bad the situation was, tell us about why it's important now to invest in deep tech more than just software, and perhaps go back on your background.
Yeah, so I mean, I have a background in software, in venture capital, and ended up randomly in the fashion industry. I didn't know how bad the fashion industry was when I kind of started out there. Same way with red meat, I guess, right? You live and you learn. And once
how bad is it?
Well,
just give us an example. Like, you know, what?
Depends on who you ask, but around the 4th or the 5th most polluting industry in terms of carbon, right? So pretty bad. And also because it's raw consumption, right? We could live without clothes, all of us. I didn't shop any clothes for 7 years, right? It was a little ridiculous at some point, especially being that I live off of producing new fashion all the time. But we can live without it, right? So yeah, and so I've been very much involved with the climate change agenda for many years. And once I realized how bad kind of fashion was, I decided to set out to see if I could fix it, right? Or contribute to fixing it. However, like to support the green transition, you need to engage with like hard tech and deep tech, right? It's the real world, the stuff that we surround ourselves with. It's not bits anymore, right? So I decided to kind of learn the trades of deep tech investing, basically. So that's what I've been doing the past couple of years. It's not easy, but it's needed. And then maybe on a more positive note, I also still believe that climate change mitigation, or at least adaptation, will be still one of the biggest business opportunities we'll see in our lifetime, right? So happy to be in that spot.
Now, you know, I'd like to have your take on this, both of you. Why is it that startups are struggling to get to the market? It seems like there's a chicken and egg situation here, where you know, you have funds that don't want to invest in startups because they want them to lower their prices, but the startups can't lower their price if they don't you know, ameliorate the production. Like, so what should be done to mitigate this situation? What are the hurdles, and maybe how can you push companies? I think that's what you're doing also with your venture, push companies to commit to offtake agreements. Maybe, Roni, explain to us the type of challenges that you face as a startup.
Well, first of all, from an investment side, it is very rare to have investors that understand both the fashion industry, the opportunity there is right now, and investing in deep tech. And very little of them also really are connected to the fashion industry. And from the brand side, brands are really asking for these solutions. They need them, both from legislation standpoint and also just how bad the situation is. But then they want the solutions, which are all quite new, to be at the competing to existing solutions. So we get compared to polyester fur, and that is obviously less expensive.
Right.
But in order for us to scale, we need to have those big orders, the quantity orders. So we can only get that if the brands will start understanding they need to invest today and pay that premium price, so we can scale down our prices and basically be able to replace the synthetic materials.
Nicolaj?
Yeah, I mean, I think we got to understand also that these are new times, right? I mean, venture capital is cut out or configured for investing in software and not factories. And that's ultimately what most of the kind of biotech-based startups want to build ultimately, right? If they're successful, they build a facility that can operate at scale. But the ticket sizes are too small for like project finance or infrastructure funds to approach that. And then you have private equity that kind of needs a cash flow in order to invest, right? So you have kind of a gap. Somebody referred to the death value of first of a kind factory, next of a kind factory, and somebody needs to address that. And I'm sure we will overcome that as the industry or the ecosystem matures. And I think at the moment, everybody kind of has it is to blame, right? Demand is definitely there. I think most the incumbents, the big companies, they want to do better, right? They want to buy the greener version of a commodity they're already using in order to reduce their carbon footprint. They don't know how to go about it. The startups on their side aren't quite good at kind of building factories either. They know their science, but they underestimate the challenges of the engineering and kind of how to raise blended funding. But it's doable, right? We just need to make people meet in the middle.
Now, what's the strategy that you adopt in your fund? Like, you were saying that you force companies or you push companies to commit to offtake agreements. How does that work?
So actually, as part of our fund, or our venture office, we're building a platform where we want to kind of help companies build offtake agreements. It's not an easy task. It's fairly complex. There are lots of moving parts, right? And typically, there's no established modus operandi internally with the most of the big incumbents. Nobody knows who owns it, or is it a liability on my balance sheet? Is it the CEO or the CFO, etc.? So help them build offtake agreements that are so solid that the startup can use them as a bankable asset, use it as leverage to raise more non-dilutive equity funding, or non-equity diluting funding, right? And then aggregate these offtake agreements so it becomes kind of a substantial asset that you can approach the market with. We just saw recently H&M and Vargas Holding launched Sire, this polyester recycling project, where they acquire kind of a newly developed technology, but then double down on the ability to scale. So they hire people from the automotive industry, bring them on board. They get H&M to provide a $600 million offtake agreement, and they approached an infrastructure fund, TPG Rise Capital. It's a $7 billion fund that then invests in the A round because they don't usually do A rounds, but they can do it in this case because they have a view to building the next 3 factories that Sire is planning to launch. So I'm sure we'll see new constellations like that will kind of try to accommodate or mitigate that situation that most of these biotech startups are faced with.
When wanting to change mentalities, you're both pioneers in this sector, right? We're at the beginning of this revolution for fashion. How does it work? What's the lever? Who needs to change first? Is it the consumers? Is it the companies? Is it the startups? Is it, as you said, maybe everyone? Where do you start?
It's everyone, but some people are able to not buy clothes, but I still want to wear my new GANNI suit. So it's really a lot also just about the brands working with innovators to help them basically create these new solutions. And we worked with GANNI from a very, very initial product, and they helped us really get to the right place and help us prove to the market that, hey, this is something that is actually working and could work on a product. But there's not many brands that are like that. And there's definitely a need for legislation and just more investing and more capital in the market.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, let's not wait for the consumers, because that's us. We're not going to sacrifice kind of short-term convenience for longer-term gains. We're not capable of that. We know that. Me too. I flew down here. I fly back tonight. I mean, it's ridiculous. So we're not going to kind of change that habit. But I think that there's a... If it isn't the consumers, then it's kind of a moral obligation that we all share, whether it's the startups or the incumbents, and we just need to embrace that and accept that supporting the green transition requires investment, right? It's got to cost you. It's not going to come for free. So you need to, as a company, sacrifice a bit of margin here and there, but you also need to have a team that kind of runs with the ball, right? You need to kind of pay for certifications, and you need to educate your workforce and all of that to change the mindset internally. So our advantage at GANNI is obviously that this is anchored with me. I'm the shareholder, right? So I can dictate that our CEO is willing to sacrifice margins. But rarely, not many companies have that luxury. I'm totally aware of that. But it needs to be anchored with shareholders. You need to be willing to sacrifice margins in order to get there. But if you want to, you can do it. So in our case, our design team, even our design team is trained in circularity, and they have a framework they work around. So they don't have the option to go for a conventional fabric, right? They have to pick the climate-friendly version, right? So you have to put up like certain rules or framework for how you work in order to succeed in this space. And there's no free lunch, right?
And where are we when it comes to regulation? How should regulation should be put in place? Is it on what level?
Well, there's just, if you're talking about materials, there's just so much regulation to be put. If you think about food regulations, there's so many, but then in fashion, it just doesn't exist.
There's nothing there.
And just like in our material, you can think about it that we're 95% more carbon efficient than animal fur and 75% more carbon efficient than faux fur, and we don't have the toxins, and it's biodegradable.
Yeah, there's a health issue too. I mean, we're talking about the environment, but it could be regulated for health issues for us as well, who are wearing this stuff.
Exactly. So, I mean, there are some regulations coming in place. There was just a recent EU regulation around sparkles, which are also microplastic going around. Right. But it's definitely not enough.
I totally welcome any kind of regulations. Like when we started mapping out our carbon footprint and compensating for that back in 2016, that was partly because we were frustrated that no politicians had the guts to introduce carbon taxes, right? I totally understand why they wouldn't, because they wouldn't be re-elected next time around, right? That's the failure of democracy. But we just didn't want to contribute to that, so we introduced carbon taxes on ourselves, right? And it immediately kind of changes your behavior. There's nothing like financial penalties or carrots for that matter that will kind of change your behavior. So any types of regulations or laws coming our way, we welcome them.
We welcome it. How would you explain why isn't the fashion industry, why is it untouched by regulation? How do you explain it?
I think it's just not talked about enough. Right. You know, even when we were at COP20,
it's awareness.
It's awareness, and it's just not being treated as seriously. When we were at COP28, you know, you had huge hubs for food, huge hubs for transport, and all the big companies were there. And then for fashion, the only brand there was Stella McCartney. Right. It was quite crazy.
And GANNI.
and GANNI and other pieces. But still, it was, you know, where are the huge fast fashion companies at COP28? Where are they?
Well, that's a good question to hand to them. Thank you so much for coming to the Global Trends Forum. It was a pleasure speaking to you both about the future of fashion and sustainable fashion specifically. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank
you. Now most people in Copenhagen would be at the bar, so I'm impressed that people hung in here.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. A warm round of applause again. Now up next, Tom and Marcus are back telling us about the new era of high-precision forecasting, helping cities, countries, and the planet anticipate and manage the risk caused by climate change.